Hey everybody, Kath here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about sanitation in a disaster or a large-scale event. You know, so often when we prepare or plan, we understand that we should store water. That's not a new concept. I don't need to teach you a lot about that. We can talk about that in future videos, but everybody gets that concept and they get really excited about how they're going to store more water, and they come up with all kinds of different types of storage and purification processes. But my concern is that they don't really comprehend what would happen if we experience a long-term outage of water or wastewater. So what I want to talk to you today about is, one, what's the likelihood that you could lose water for an extended period of time? And two, what are the realities if we do lose that water? Now, I have a unique understanding of this because I work for my state's Division of Emergency Management as a critical infrastructure specialist. So I work with your utility providers, your power and energy, water, wastewater, transportation, communication, your major players in critical infrastructure. I work with them on a regular basis to see how they would respond in a disaster. We collaborate and we work on all kinds of plans. And I'm here to say they're really good at what they do. I'm not here to try to scare you. They have lots of backup plans. The engineering is sophisticated. The water and wastewater utilities, they're really good at what they do. I have a lot of respect for those individuals who run those systems and operate them. They are constantly training. They're constantly updating their plans. I have full confidence in their abilities. But there are some inherent vulnerabilities to those systems. One of the reasons for that is because those systems are buried. Our pipelines and our wells and boosters and all those things, they're underground. So there are going to be a certain amount of vulnerabilities that they won't be able to overcome. Some of the examples of that would be anytime the ground moves, like an earthquake. In our state, we plan for a large-scale earthquake frequently. I know a lot of states do. We experience, or we expect to experience, that if our fault ruptures, about 70% of our population lives near or on or around it, and we're concerned about that. So anytime the ground moves, you're going to have pipes rupture. The concern with the water and wastewater individuals is the fact that there are literally thousands upon thousands of connections to those systems under your homes, at your street corners. Whenever you connect to the system, there are thousands of those. And they have a handful of guys that can come in and make those repairs. So they're trying to promote a message that if we do experience a large-scale outage or a large ground movement, it's not going to be 72 hours before they can get your water back on. It's going to be weeks to months. Now, do we have agreements in which we can bring in other states' skilled labor to help with that? Of course, and your state would do that. But it is not going to be 72 hours. It's going to be a much longer period of time if we experience a lot of ground shaking. Landslides can cause those issues as well. You can lose your water and wastewater connection if there's a landslide nearby. There's always the man-made threat, right? Cyber attack. Those systems use SCADA networks that we're concerned about. So someone could shut down a large system for an extended period of time with hacking, and they're working on those fixes and systems all the time. We can experience it from contamination, right? You can have diesel fuel get into the water system, blue algae, all kinds of contaminants. It is possible for it to happen. It's not frequent, and again, the technology is good. But it does happen, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who've experienced outages from contamination. So those can cause long-term outages. Flooding's another one. That was weird to me as I was originally researching. I guess I never really thought that if you have too much water, you're going to lose your water. And that's because all those systems that process our water and bring it back to your home, if they are overwhelmed with water or they have too much water, they're going to lose water. So we could experience a long-term outage simply with flooding. You can also lose water with a long-term power outage. So often when people think that they're planning for a power outage, they're all excited, they're buying their flashlights and their solar gear and all their neat ways to light things, ways to heat things, ways to keep your freezer going, ways to keep your house warm. They're thinking about that without really realizing that if we have a long-term power outage, you're going to lose your water and wastewater. That's simply because all of those systems and processes are powered by energy, right? They require power to deliver the water back to your home or take water away from your home. So that's something to think about. If we experience a long-term power outage, you're going to experience a long-term water and wastewater issue. So let's talk about a couple of examples of where it went really wrong. So I wanted to talk about Haiti, the Haiti earthquake in 2010. It was a really fascinating case study. If you ever have the time to really look into it. It was a devastating earthquake. There were hundreds of thousands of casualties. A lot of organizations came in to help, right? They're setting up shelters, they're flooding. They had a little bit of a bottleneck at the airport. Again, really fascinating stuff to talk about that we don't have time today. What I want to talk about is the fact that they experienced what we call a secondary disaster. That's an event that's caused by the effects of the first disaster. And what that was an outbreak of cholera. During that response, they had an outbreak of cholera that was so devastating. For those of you that don't know what cholera is, it's an intestinal illness. There's very little you can do to treat it. There's very little medicine for it. They try to hydrate you. They try to quarantine you. It spreads like wildfire through touch, through mucus, through the air. In fact, for example, this is how bad it spreads. In that event, after the earthquake, Haiti had an outbreak of cholera that impacted 1.1 million people. 1,100,000 people became sick with cholera after the earthquake. Now, 800,000 of those cases were what we call subclinical, meaning, sorry, you're very sick, but there's nothing that we can do to help you. Please go back to your shelter, go home, try to quarantine yourself, try to stay hydrated, but you're not going to stay in the hospital. However, during that response where you're trying to keep hospitals up and running with supplies and doctors and power, you had 300,000 people that were taking up beds with cholera. In that event, 4,500 people died of cholera after the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. It was devastating. Now, the World Health Organization and other health organizations wanted to know what happened, what caused it. Because there were lots of rumors. People were saying, oh, the volunteers that came in brought it. We didn't know how to deal with that. And that caused the outbreak. So many organizations wanted to know what was going on. They did some research. They discovered that a professionally set up shelter was disposing of their waste improperly. And that caused the outbreak of cholera. It's a major situation. And a lot of people say, well, you know, wherever we're at, our community won't suffer from that because we have really high standards and we know what we're doing. Well, it was a professionally set up shelter. And honestly, I think that in the United States especially, we're going to be a little more at risk than they were. You see, in Haiti, they don't have the beautiful infrastructure that we have. When we flip a switch, the power comes on. When I use my faucet, my water comes out. When I flush the toilet, it goes away. And every Tuesday, my trash man picks up all my waste, and I don't have to ever think about it again. Whereas in some of those parts of the world, they're regularly purifying their own water, regularly dealing with their own waste and debris and managing those things. We're not. We're going to be like infants if we experience something that's large scale. There was another earthquake that we like to study in Christchurch, New Zealand. Again, it was devastating. There were actually two. They suffered from a lot of liquefaction. We're going to talk about liquefaction in just a second here. But they also suffered from those systems being compromised, their water and wastewater systems, and just working so hard. There's still areas of Christchurch, New Zealand that do not have wastewater restored. In the 5 months after that event, their wastewater guys were still working 24/7 shifts to repair them. 10 months after the event, they were still dumping wastewater into the estuaries. Okay. Immediately following that Christchurch, New Zealand earthquake, they had 36,000 requests for repair for the city waterworks. It was devastating for what those earthquakes will do to your water systems. And as they're trying to repair it, whenever you repair a water system, you test it and you repair it and you test it. And if it tests good, you test again and you test. You're about to deliver water to a community. So they tested a lot. Typically in the United States, we experience about 30 cases of E. coli a year nationally. During that event in Christchurch, New Zealand, as they were testing the water, they had 121 positive tests for E. coli in central Christchurch alone. And then other outlying areas, as they were trying to test and fix that water, they just kept coming back positive for E. coli. That's not cases. That's not a person who's sick. That was a positive result from a water system that has E. coli. 121 in central Christchurch alone. We're going to experience a lot of disaster. Again, when you have liquefaction issues, here's the other problem. So liquefaction, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, When you have an earthquake, the water underneath the ground combines with the silt and the soil, and it mixes to make kind of this quicksand mud that comes up, it bubbles up, and it overwhelms your road. It breaks apart your road. It's powerful. It's devastating. It is even a biohazard because as it's moving, its broken sewer pipes are flooding that liquefaction, silt and water and quicksand and coming up on your roads, and now you're walking in this muck that you think you're going to be able to drive through. You're not. It will break apart the roads, and even roads that it didn't break apart, it will overwhelm it and become quicksand. And then it hardens and becomes cement. It's devastating. It will destroy those pipes. I'll show you some images here that show you that even a pipe that's not damaged, if that liquefaction seeps into that pipe and hardens, you can't use a pig or a vac truck to clean it out. You have to replace the pipe. It becomes like cement. That's why it's going to be weeks to months before your water's back on, not 72 hours. It's going to be a very long time. Now, there is a couple of other issues that a lot of people don't understand. When you lose water or wastewater for a significant amount of time, your home is at risk. You have in your home throughout it regularly what we call P-traps. It's underneath your sink, right? You have a curved pipe. It traps moisture in it, and it does many different things. It protects you from fumes and all kinds of stuff in order to protect your home. And what we don't realize is that if there is a long-term power water outage, those P-traps are going to dry up. Some of you may have experienced this before. If you've had a broken pipe, a tree that got into it, something, you've experienced a disaster. When that P-trap dries up, it smells like sewage. Your home, you walk in, you know it, you can smell it. It smells real bad. And you'll call a plumber and say, my house smells like a sewer. What do I do? And he'll say or she'll say, your P-trap probably dried up. And if you can find it, you can pour a little water back down into it. But then they're coming out to your home to see what happened, what went wrong to cause that P-trap to dry up. They have to repair it. It's actually very dangerous. You see, what you're smelling when a P-trap starts to dry up is hydrogen sulfide. Now, hydrogen sulfide is a chemical asphyxiant, similar to cyanide gases or carbon monoxide, okay? A healthy person at 0 to 10 parts per million is going to have irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat, some respiratory irritation. That's a healthy person. At 10 to 50 parts per million, they're going to have things like headache, dizziness, nausea, coughing, things like that. At 50 to 200 parts per million, your symptoms are going to be much worse, and they can cause all kinds of sickness, convulsions, and comas, even death in severe cases. So what happens is, as those P-traps begin to dry up because you don't have water in the P-traps any longer and those pipes are broken and there's no pressure in them, those fumes can start to seep into your home, and that hydrogen sulfide is very deadly. You shouldn't stay in a home. Another problem with your P-traps drying up is the fact that those gases from the sewer also contain methane gases, which are highly flammable. They have a very low ignition energy and can cause a problem that if your home is filling with those fumes, it's flammable. Another issue you're going to have, which is a little scary and gross, but the fact that if those pipes have broken and busted up underneath your house and don't have pressure, all the vermin and insects that live underground and even above ground are looking for a safe, warm place to go. And they're going to use those broken pipes to gain access into your home. And you have to protect your home. If you're trying to stay in a home which doesn't have water or wastewater, which I always recommend, if your community is saying it's time to evacuate, it's time to evacuate. Do what they say and go. But if it is a long-term outage, you don't have the ability to evacuate, your home is structurally sound, and you're trying to stay in it, you have to protect your home from the vermin that carry disease and the insects that carry disease from gaining access. You also have to protect your home from hydrogen sulfide and methane gases. So I want to stop here as part of this series, but I hope you can follow me for part 2 of this series, and we're going to talk about some of the other dangers that will happen when people are trying to solve a problem and they're actually making really bad choices that are going to affect your community. So I hope you come back and watch part 2 of this. Thanks.